You are. Hang on a second. We got to get things back to normal here. Let's see what we got. Oh, yeah. It's morning time. It's time for gas. Hi, I'm Hot Rod Bob. You've got gas, the morning edition. Sorry about that. I got a little distracted here, but that's not unusual for me. Hey, I'm glad you're here because if you are a gasaholic. Thanks for being part of GAAS, the Great American Auto Scene, since 1990. Yeah, I'm that old. And we've been around for quite some time, originally starting on radio, the Kaleidoscope Radio Network, and then moving on to Speed Scene Live TV, and then on our own. We've got GAAS. How you doing this morning? Hi, Steve Markwart, Pete Muriello, and Rob. How are you doing this morning? Remember, GAAS brought to you by Service Tech Equipment. For the equipment you need to service your car. They've got it, and they'll get it to you. All right, we're going to talk about a car that made history. This car was considered the most impactful car on the automotive industry ever. Yes, it was. And it was the Model T Ford. Now, many people think of the Model T as, the 1920s. You remember the Norm Grabowski and the Tommy Ivo hot rods and Ed Iskandarian's hot rod and many others. But the T really started in 1908. That is the first year of the Model T Ford. Now, a lot of people don't realize that they went back that far, and those cars are considered what they said were brass era cars. Also, in that time frame, there were no model years, and production of the Model T actually started in August of 1908. So August 1908, the first Model T rolled off an assembly line. Now, although Ford did not create the assembly line, although he's given a lot of credit for it, Ransom E. Oldsmobile Company, yeah, REO, that's REO Trucks, he developed the assembly line for his curved dash Oldsmobile. But Ford took it a step further and modernized it, made it bigger, made it more efficient, and produced a car based on the assembly line procedures that was affordable to the middle class of the time. The first Model T sold for more than the last Model Ts, and every year of production, prices were almost able to go down because the cost of building the cars got less. They could build more, they can build them quicker. But the Model T was a success not only because of the assembly line procedure and the fact that it was low cost, but for the time, it was a pretty reliable vehicle. Now, it had a four-cylinder engine all the way through its life. Basically, the same engine. There were changes. The first Model Ts came out, and they had a water pump to cool them. A cost-cutting measure, Henry Ford came up with a system, his engineers, that was actually a siphoning system. With the heat of the water rising, it would siphon the cooler water through the cooling system back into the engine. And that's the system that was on them later on. It saved the cost of a water pump. Okay, we're only talking pennies to dollar, maybe, in overall production, but that's what Henry did to save money to sell those cars to the average Joe. And it worked quite well. Now, the Model T wasn't designed by Henry. He had a team of designers and engineers that put that car together, but he led by telling them what he wanted. And sometimes those things didn't work, and sometimes they didn't. Now, the Model T Ford engine put out a whole 22 horsepower and was good for 13 miles per gallon. Not very efficient by four-cylinder standards at any point in time, but at that time, that wasn't an issue. One of the unique things about the Model T, it was able to run on just about any type of combustible fuel. It ran on kerosene, gasoline, or ethanol. Now, ethanol, we know, is alcohol. The Model T could run on that. It was extremely low compression, too, for the time, so there was no need for an electric starter, just a hand crank. Now, the Model T did get an electric starter later on, but that was much later on. And the first Model Ts were all crank start. The engine was 177 cubic inches, and the car had a top speed in the neighborhood of 40 to 45 miles per hour. Now, I told you the fuel mileage was kind of dismal. On a good day, you could get 21 miles per gallon downhill with a tailwind, but average was somewhere around 13 to 15 miles per gallon. The decreased cost of gas made gas the prime choice for fuel for the car, but for people at farms and out in the rural areas, whatever they could get that would burn, they could use. And that's why I'm saying alcohol with ethanol or kerosene. And kerosene was used for many things back in the time, so it was more readily available and easier to come with. Now, the ignition system of the Model T was kind of unusual. Back in those days, they didn't have a battery in the car. Again, there's no starter, so you don't need a battery to start the car. The lights, they were gas lights. They weren't electrically run. So how did you start the car? Where did the electricity come from for the spark plugs? Well, it was a magneto. It was a very simple low voltage magneto that was part of the flywheel of the vehicle. And because it was low voltage and the car cranked, you could crank it fast enough to get the magneto to work, and hence the engine would start. So that was one of the things that you did for that. Now, Ford did get, like I said, they did get a starter, but it was later on, and electric lighting didn't come out on the Model Ts until 1915. Before that, they were using acetylene and oil lamps for lighting. But the electric starting was offered in 1919, so now they needed a battery. Yeah, so an improvement. Things started to change. Ford was always a little behind in the times, and a lot of companies, Ransom Olds, started with a starter, an electric starter. A lot of companies started using that to keep people from having to get out in front of the car and crank it. Now, the transmission on the Model T was rather unique. He called it a 3-speed, but you had to count reverse as one of those speeds. It wasn't a transmission you shifted manually. You shifted with the pedal, basically, and a lever that really wasn't a shifter. It was just position. There were 3 pedals on the car. None of them worked like today. You had no throttle pedal. The throttle was a lever on the steering column. We'll go over that in just a little bit. The left-hand pedal is used to engage the transmission, basically kind of like a clutch pedal. Now, the clutch wasn't what you think of today in a clutch. Now, today, for manual transmissions, you think of a big round clutch. Not so, with a good friction material. The friction material in the Fords was wood. Yeah, wood. That was the extra strong material used. Hard, bent wood. All right, the Model T entered high gear when you lifted the left pedal. Now, most people think that's a clutch. Not really. That's actually what shifted the transmission, which was a planetary style transmission. Now, for those of you who don't understand what a planetary transmission is, an automatic transmission is a planetary gear transmission. And that's because there's one big gear that rotates and the small gear, and they rotate, and it all works. And I've never figured out an automatic transmission. Now, the first 800 Model Ts that were produced, you engaged reverse gear with a lever. All units after that used the center pedal to get reverse gear. Interesting. And we think computers are confusing. Can you imagine driving this car? Now, remember, most other companies that had manual transmissions in their cars, and this kind of was a manual, had a clutch pedal. They also had a brake pedal for slowing the vehicle down, and a throttle pedal. Not the Ford. I'll tell you what, I couldn't drive a Model T even today. You talk about kids now trying to figure out how to drive a manual transmission. Can you imagine trying to get them to drive this? Ain't gonna happen, folks. So Model Ts didn't get stolen very often unless you knew how to drive one, I guess. Now, the clutch is a wet clutch. And in cold weather, that could be a problem because the transmission fluids or oils would thicken, and it wouldn't allow the clutches necessarily to release. So cranking the car, if you didn't have it perfectly in gear, would get the car to creep forward or backwards or run you over. And we've seen joke pictures of this in movies when you look at some of the old Buster Keaton and other comedians that did these silent movies and early talkies. But, that really happened. So it was based on that. Now, Ford did have a truck, not a pickup truck. And we'll go into what a pickup truck was. The Model TT, the double T, was a heavy-duty truck. Now, to make this a better vehicle for hauling, they put in a worm gear in their differential setup, and it actually went slower, but it had more grunt to pull. Now, think about that for a second. There were no highways. There were no major thoroughfares. So if the car traveled 30, 35 miles an hour, or truck, that was good enough. That was actually fast for the time, and that was okay. Now, there were two major types of bands, not clutches, but bands on the transmissions. The first ones were cotton cloth, and it was a woven cloth lining specified by Ford, and it was kinder to the transmission drum that they would grab onto to get the car to move. The wood linings were offered as a longer life accessory because you had to change these things on a regular basis. It wasn't something you went hundreds of miles or thousands of miles. They were frequently changed. The Model T suspension was typical Ford. From the time Ford came out with the Model T, and even before that, through 1948, the buggy spring, one front, one rear, was employed. Now, they changed the shapes and the angles and so forth over the years and got softer ride by lining them with a slippery surface, or you grease or you wrap them. But the Model T, true to form, used that single buggy spring front and rear. The original Model Ts came out with a wood spoke wheel, hardwood artillery wheels, and later on, 1926 and 27, production. Again, there were no model years. We call them model years today, and the states register vehicles based on a model year designation. But the Model T did not have a model year designation. It was production dates, and that's what they went by. They made running changes along the line, and that was why you needed a production date information. Japan is the same way, folks. It's just the U.S. that has this model year thing, and possibly Europe as well now. In 1925, they came out with bigger tires. Now, they weren't bigger diameter-wise, but they were wider, they were softer, they took less air pressure, making the ride a little bit better, and the ride on a Model T is rough. So they called these balloon tires, and that was an industry standard at the time, coming up with these fatter tires, rounder, with steel reinforcements around the bead, and they took lower air pressure, giving vehicles a better ride. The T's had a wheelbase of 100 inches. Not bad. Now, colors. Cassie Nunez brought out a thing which says, well, you can have any color as long as it was black. Well, according to historians, that was only in the 1914 model year. Now, I talked about the transmission being confusing. The color combinations were confusing as well. The first years of production from 1908 to 1913, the Model T was not available in black. That's right, no black, but rather only gray, green, blue, and red. Now, green was available on the touring cars, town cars, coupes, and landaulettes. Someone tell me what that is. Gray was only available on the town cars, and red was only available on the open touring cars. By 1912, the cars were being painted midnight blue with black fenders. Only in 1914 was the slogan, any color as long as it's black, policy implemented. And that was because of drying time of the paints. Now, you got to remember, the technology in paint was just as backwards as everything else at the time. And drying time was an issue during manufacturing. The black paints at the time dried faster than the colors. And that's why Henry did that. Another cost-saving measure. The faster the paint dries, the quicker you can produce the car or assemble the car. Now, paint colors also became quite an issue during World War II, because of technology and so forth then. In 1920s, nitrocellulose lacquers became available, and those paints dried much quicker, and that's what Henry went to. However, there were over 30 different types of black paint used on the Model T, depending on what part of the car it went to. There we go. Hi, Rex wrote, having lunch? Indigestion will be next. Scott Kehoe, good morning to you as well. Now, although the Ford classified the Model T with a single letter designation throughout its entire life, there's no distinction on models anywhere. And again, the Model T was a continuation of designs. The first Ford production car was a Model A, and he labeled them with letters all the way through. But not all of the letter cars went into production. Some were prototypes or test vehicles, and when it came to the Model T, it was in order. So 20 some odd years of production, and you had a Model T. The car that followed the Model T, though, was the Model A. And the reason they did that is because it was so revolutionarily different than previous Fords. Henry said, let's start again. And the Model A came out in 1929. Actually, 28. Yeah, 1928 was the first Model A. And it wasn't by his choice. Edsel Ford promoted the Model A to get into current vehicle design and styling. The Model T had been around for so long, but telemarketers, what are you going to do? Hey, Joe Bartlett, how are you? And Rick McGee, good morning to you. All right, so 1909 to 1914 is characterized by the nearly straight five-sided hood with a flat top containing a center hinge and two side sloping sections. And that was one of the easy things. The firewall was flat from the windshield down with no cowl on the Model Ts. Those are also brass-era cars. The hood design in 1915 and 16 is nearly the same, but the only obvious change was there were louvers on the vertical sides. A significant change to the cowl area occurred with the windshield relocated significantly behind the firewall and joined at a compound contoured cowl area. These years where the electric headlights replaced the carbide headlights that they were using for better visibility. 1917 to 1923, the hood design was changed to a tapered design. The folding hinges were now located at the joints between the flat sides of the curved top. Now, sometimes these are referred to as low hood by the Model T guys. 1923 and 1925. Now, to me, that is the most popular Model T produced because it was the one that is reproduced in fiberglass by so many other people. And it is also the car that we associate with Model T hot rods. You don't see the earlier body styles on hot rods very often. They're out there if you can find an original steel, but all the reproduction Model T bodies were either 23 to 25 or 26 and 27. The majority of them are the 23 to 25s, and to me, those are the style I like. And because, well, the Model T hit the streets as a hot rod first, and the ones we saw were the Grabowski car and the Ivo car. They were on TV and in movies, and that's why that car is my favorite of the Model T line. Of course, I do like the closed cab coupes and the sedans as well. 26 to 27 was a complete change for the Model T body-wise. Nothing was carried over from the 23 to 25, and it was very stylish for the time. The mechanicals still remained pretty much the same, although there were changes along the way. Now, one of the things that was different, the Model T had very small doors compared to the Model A, and that's what came about. So the Model T, a significant vehicle. Now, one of the things we talked about a little while ago, and I got to talk about, was pickups. Where did the name pickup truck come from? Well, let's go back to the Model T. The Model T basic body on the two-seater was a separate piece from the turtle deck or the trunk area. However, if you wanted a pickup truck, it was the same body, you just eliminated the turtle deck. But that was not a regular production vehicle. So what you did is you bought the Model T, you ordered the pickup bed, or the bed for the truck. They didn't call it a pickup. But you had to go back to the dealer to pick it up. And that's how the name pickup truck got started. All right, I'm Hot Rod Bob. You've got gas, the morning edition. You've been teed off here today. Thanks for tuning in. Remember, Service Tech Equipment, the sponsors of GAAS, as well as Valleyhead Service, Irwindale Speedway, Irwindale Drag Strip. They're racing this weekend at Irwindale Drag Strip, but it's limited to 100 cars, 4 crew people per vehicle. So, you know someone who's racing? Become a crew person, and you can get in. All right, guys, have a great day, and gals. I'll be talking to you again tomorrow. I'm Hot Rod Bob. You've got gas, the morning edition. Thanks for being a gasaholic. And please, go to my YouTube page. Check it out. You can watch the full series of gas shows. Gosh, dating back at least 3-4 months right now. I'm adding more as we go along. As well as Two Tired Guys Productions YouTube page, where you can see all the 1-hour-long gas episodes, as well as talking about cars with Randy Kerdoon. I'm Hot Rod Bob. You've got gas, the morning edition. Also, forgot to tell you, iTunes. Listen to Gas on iTunes. This way you don't have to watch my ugly face. You guys have a great day. I'm Hot Rod Bob, and you've got gas, the morning edition. Have a great day.